everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Finish Line, Navigating the Journey After Residency, the podcast that helps physicians just emerging from medical training, as well as those who find themselves somewhere down the line, wondering what comes next in their lives. To create a career path that emerges from self-awareness, core values, and life balance, a path leading to thriving and not just surviving. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Sherman, pediatrician, physician coach, consultant, and retreat facilitator. And today I am very happy to have an amazing guest, and this is Dr. JB. Dr. JB, thanks so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Naomi Jean Baptiste, and she's affectionately known as Dr. JB. And Dr. JB and I have appeared in different settings to try to give advice and support medical students and pre-med students in trying to stay healthy and well during their time of training. And she's a board certified emergency room physician based in Orlando, Florida. And she's a visionary and founder and CEO of Hope for Med. It's a wellness organization dedicated to supporting healthcare professionals. Leveraging innovative technology, Hope for Med connects pre-med students, medical students, and early career physicians to a comprehensive network of peers and valuable resources, empowering them to flourish in both their personal and professional lives. Welcome to the program, Dr. JB.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. I've always been inspired by your work, and I think for me, just the insight that you have in knowing really what it takes to support physicians as they're just starting out, either on the path to their careers in training or in their practices afterwards. So I'd love to just start out by you telling us about how you got to where you are and what your story is.
Okay, well, I started from humble beginnings. So I am originally from Haiti, hence the last name Jean Baptiste, which actually is synonymous with Smith or Johnson, in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I was raised in the States, and I'm the first doctor in my family. Wow. And so when I was going through this journey, I actually didn't have a lot of guidance because nobody that I personally knew had gone through this before me. And needless to say, I stepped on my fair share of mines along the way to becoming a physician. I actually wanted to be a pediatrician when Yes.
Came to your senses. Yeah.
Everything was peds when I was applying for my medical school training. And everybody asked me, so then what happened? I did my peds rotation. But really, I had a very life-altering experience when I was a third year in medical school because the Haiti earthquake happened during that time period. And I remember sitting in front of that screen and, watching the National Palace in Haiti destroyed and, really just feeling like I wanted to do something to help. And so I made a determination that as a third year medical student, I was going to find some way to get to Haiti. And I did. 1 week later, I was in Haiti. Wow. And I was in a tent camp, literally right across the street from the National Palace. And I was their interpreter. And I love to affectionately remember that time period as I was the comic relief for the Haitian people. While I did speak Creole better than my fellow healthcare professionals, my Creole was pretty bad growing up in America. And so I spoke it, like literally I translated word for word English into Creole. So it kind of sounded backwards, but I was able to get the message across. But really, it was during that time period in Haiti that my career path completely changed because I was there, I was working, I was seeing all sorts of patients, infants, elderly, fractures, infected wounds, all sorts of stuff. And I remember asking the people I was working with, what kind of doctor do I need to be able to respond in the crisis like this? And that's where emergency medicine came into my vision. And so when I came back, I changed all of my personal statements and applied for emergency medicine residency. And here I am, an ER
Wow.
doctor.
What a story, just to kind of get started there, and that exposure to global health that I had also early on in my career. And it really changes your whole perspective. So you returned and you decided to pursue emergency medicine and went through your residency. And can you tell us then how, as you moved through your residency, you were then inspired to kind of, besides all the busyness of residency and just trying to keep up with things, you also had this emerging idea in your mind that there was something more needed than just becoming the emergency room physician that you have become. So tell us more about that.
Well, I always had a fondness for, or a fondness
Hmm.
for wellness. And throughout all of my training, I, really realized the importance of wellness in terms of helping us survive this experience. Because truthfully, training, the whole entire path and journey through medicine is challenging from the
Yeah.
very beginning. And then even beyond, now as an attending physician, you think life gets easier, but it just gets more complicated, right? Because now you're
Mm.
you're juggling a lot more things. So, but the whole idea of Hope for Med did not start until after I was working as an attending for a couple of years. And a
Hmm.
couple of things happened. Really the birth of Hope for Med happened around the time of COVID,
Mm.
when I was working in the emergency room as a first responder, seeing all of this grief and death and dying right around me.
Yeah.
And I remember looking around at my colleagues and asking the question, who takes care of us?
What an amazing question. That's a very few people. And this is your residency was in New York City. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I went to New York Presbyterian.
Mm.
And so as I was, because so a couple of things.
Hmm.
One, when I was working in the ER
Hmm.
and seeing what I was seeing, right, and trying to figure out what do I do with all this trauma that I'm experiencing day in and day out, and realizing that nobody really understands what I'm going through like a peer.
Mm.
My husband doesn't. He's not medical. I don't want to bring this home to my family. So what did I do? I kind of just kept it inside and
Mm.
tried to compartmentalize it. And as I'm trying to process this whole who takes care of us, another life altering thing happened. And like we mentioned, I went to New York Presbyterian for my residency. And on the news was the unfortunate death of Dr. Lorna Breen.
Mm.
And that sent shockwaves throughout the entire New York Presbyterian community. Dr. Lorna Breen was my attending physician when I was going through residency. And in the world of emergency medicine, there's not a lot of female ER doctors. We're still a
Yeah.
minority. It's growing, but we're still a minority. And to learn of her death and that she died by suicide
Hmm.
really, really ignited something inside of me that said, I need to do something and I need to do it now.
Mm.
And so it was the combination of those two things that birthed Hope for Med.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Dr. Lorna Breen graduated from my medical school, so I was aware of that also. And, the epidemic of physician suicide is something that a lot of the general public doesn't know about. But I have to applaud because most I believe families of physicians as well as institutions, they don't want to talk about it, as well as, um, it's people's personal business, but it is a tragedy that exists and is something that we physicians are well aware of. But I have to applaud the family of Dr. Lorna Breen for everything they've done afterwards. But I would love for you to tell us about how that event kind of reinforced your commitment to doing something to support your fellow physicians.
Well, truthfully, that event really brought into the forefront of my mind the severity of the mental health epidemic amongst us as healthcare professionals and physicians
Mm.
in particular, with approximately 300 to 400 doctors dying every single year by suicide. And that's not a new statistic, that's an ongoing statistic. And so, with that realization, I really thought, one of the things that I really wanted to tackle was this whole sense of isolation that we have as physicians. I wanted to let my fellow physicians know that they are not alone in whatever it is that they're going through, whatever their struggles may be, and that we are all in this together. And so the quickest thing I was able to launch was a podcast. And so I launched a podcast, Hope for Med podcast, where I shared the stories of healthcare professionals. I shared their stories of burnout. I started by reconnecting them with their why medicine. And, through those stories, I saw that so many fellow healthcare professionals were really able to connect with the stories of others and really learn the importance of sharing your story and giving easy opportunities for people to be able to do that with their peers. And then I also understood the sensitivity in, some of these conversations that we don't normally have about mental health, and that different people may have different comfort levels in terms of sharing and speaking. And so, starting with the podcast, I did allow for options for anonymity if people so chose to go down that path. Me and my team were able to change their voice, not share their screen, not share their name, but allow their story to come across, because that is what's most needed. Really, to let other people know that if you are going through XYZ, that it's very possible that there are other healthcare professionals, other physicians just like you, that have gone through similar experiences as you. And there's nothing wrong with you, right? It's actually quite normal, and really trying to normalize these feelings and these experiences. And then we kind of just grew from there.
I think that's amazing. I think really that idea that given the amount of stress that we as physicians undergo through all of our medical training and the pressure that we're under, as well as for you to have experienced the whole pandemic during your residency and beyond, is something that I think anyone, any kind of normal, whatever you want to classify that as, human being would obviously have some mental distress, would obviously be pushed to their limits. And reaching out for help is something that's not part of our culture as physicians. I know for myself, I had to, after the first year of my practice, I started to have symptoms of anxiety and needed to reach out for help, and did get that help that I needed. But tell us about, for you personally, as you made this transition and you realized that other physicians needed this support, especially those young physicians just starting out. How in the world were you able to balance for yourself your own work as an emergency room physician and this emerging program that you had? And I'd love to hear more about the components of that first. I mean, afterwards, but first, just about your own story, about your own balance and your own well-being.
Well, truthfully, it was challenging because I was still working, and I still am working as a full-time ER physician. And in addition to balancing my full-time job and this new business that I was starting, the startup company, I also am a mom and a wife, and so I had my family and a young family that I had to go ahead and balance. And so really it took a lot of planning, right? The the good thing about emergency medicine is that it's essentially shift work.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as I had my schedule, I was able to schedule things around it. And thankfully, I have a very, very supportive husband who really stepped in to help with the kids as we grew Hope for Med. I would not have been able to do that without that level of support that I had in my husband.
Yeah. So having supportive family members that understand, especially like you said previously, a lot of times our family members don't really understand what we go through on a daily basis. But when that connection is there and that commitment is there for that support, it sounds like that was extremely important for you.
Mm-hmm. Extremely. And still
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
still is.
So tell us a little bit more about Hope for Med and the components of how the program has grown and what types. You mentioned the podcast.
Which
What
is
other types of activities do you have for supporting physicians early in their careers?
so I realized with the podcast that it was very cathartic for the featured speakers
Hmm.
really to be able to just express themselves as well as those who listened. But I wanted to do more, and I wanted to reach out to more of a larger audience. And so because of that, we grew from just podcasts into a online like membership site. However, it was extremely important for me to have that element of anonymity in there. And so around that time is when I learned about Web3 and the metaverse. And it dawned on me that the use of virtual spaces would allow for me to be able to create what I wanted to create in terms of creating this community with the option for anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can still go and get the experience in real time. And then you have the option to be able to share as much or as little about yourself as you want, but you can still reap the benefits of being a part of a community. And so the work that we do with Hope for Med takes place in a virtual setting. And so we have this, we call it like a living community where we have evergreen 24/7 study rooms and co-working spaces. We also have access to guided meditation where you can either do it collectively with others or independently. All of our, of course, podcasts or podcast listening room. Again, it's all about the collective, right? Because what I am trying to really battle is the whole entire concept that you're in this alone. You are not in this alone. Really tackling this epidemic of loneliness that is ever so prevalent. And the Surgeon General did mention that, that's a huge issue. And and so Whole Food is all about the collective. Everything we do is all group based. And so, yeah, so we have these co-working spaces, we have these podcast listening rooms that are group based, we have, access to all of our panel discussions that we have, which takes place once a month. And it varies in terms of topics. So we have topics that are focused on pre-med students. We have topics for medical students, topics for, early career professionals. And and then the latest thing that we created was using technology is our AI companions. And so these are tools that you can have access to through your phone that really is focused on the learners. And so if you're a pre-med student, if you're a medical student, even a resident, we have these different AI companions that really are quick references to help with content review, as well as, helping to make sure that this information stays fresh in your brain. And even when you're in the wards and even as a attending physician, you're like, what is this disease process again? You just ask that question and it's a conversational AI that is right there on your phone and easily accessible.
Wow. So you really have grown and embraced the technology that a more senior person like myself may not be able to manipulate as well as some of the younger physicians. I'm curious because with all the epidemic of burnout, people are constantly debating whether it's all about the organization and the structure and all of the dysfunction within the environment which physicians function in versus the personal mindset and the personal approach of the individual physician themselves. It seems like you have been able to kind of address both of those issues, that kind of how can I myself be build up that, I hate to use the word resilient because physicians are the most resilient people that I know, but to build up that sense of self, that sense of balance that you talk about, but also have these other tools that help that environment, the structure, the organization where you're working function to your advantage. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the specific issues that you've heard brought up by folks either that you've interviewed or who you serve through Hope for Med, especially those just emerging into their practices?
So in terms of like burnout or just anything, any topics that they're struggling with?
What are the issues, the major issues that they face?
So it really just depends on where you are on this path, right? In terms of the issues that you're dealing with. And since I, work with people in different places during this path. So, with those who are new graduates and starting their careers.
Yeah.
The biggest issue is, how do I choose? What do I do next?
Yeah.
Because now that you're about to graduate, this path is wide open, right? Because getting to this point, right, you were, all right, well, I'm pre-med and I have to take XYZ courses, then I have to take the MCAT. It's very like laid out for you that first I do this, then I do that, then I do this, then I go to residency, and then I, maybe I make a
line
decision.
Is there, and then, what happens when there's no more finish lines? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's just like, okay, now what do I do? And in terms of figuring out your first job, and, one of the things that I try to advise people is your first job is not going to be your last job. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be your last job, right? It's actually a learning opportunity for you to, realize, oh, is money really all that important to me in the end? And I learned this from personal experience because I went after the money. I'll be completely honest, right?
Sure.
Like you struggled for so long, and I was like, I'm going to go after the one with the highest paying position. So the highest paying position brought me to some rural place in Ohio, and I picked up my family from New York City. We went to this rural hospital in Ohio, And after working there for a couple months, I realized, in the end, money really is not as important as I thought it was.
Yeah, right, right.
And there are other things that I need to take into account, like support. Do I have any support in this location that I'm at? Resources like schools and things like that, especially if you have a family or are planning on having a family, social life and nightlife, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
all of these
mm-hmm.
things are really important for you to take into account. And granted, again, your first job is not going to be your last,
Right.
unless, I mean, there are some situations where that is the case, but 9 times out of 10, it's not. And, but really taking time to find out what are your priorities. If you can make a list of, what are the most like must haves of, any particular job or any place that I want to live or anything like that. Um, so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is there are a lot of vultures out there. Once you start getting a check as a doctor, there are a lot of vultures out there that are going to try to say sweet nothings in your ear
Wow.
about what you should do with your money and
Ah,
where you should put it. And these are all things that I didn't know, right? And it
yeah.
sounded good, and so I went with it, and I got burnt. And again, I told you I stepped on every mine. So, and that's why we have Hope for Med, so that you can have access to some of these educational resources to know the questions to ask, so that you don't do the same things that many of us before you have done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's really fascinating to me, is that especially because you go all of this time trying to, you have all these many of us, probably the majority of medical students have quite a bit of debt by the time they get to the other side. And so that paycheck really sounds like very enticing to go for the highest pay. And yet I love this concept. And it's also for my coaching clients, I try to emphasize to them, you're just trying to decide what the next step in your life is going to be, because you have no idea what life will bring you and how your life will change coming into the future. So try not to make it a forever decision. It's what makes the most sense at this particular stage in your life. And where do you feel? I know that going through a lot of training and everything up to the point of finishing residency or fellowship, we really look toward mentors. We look for attendings, role models to kind of tell us, what do you think we should do? And from your perspective, where do you feel comes the greatest support, the best way that you can help find that inner voice, that inner guidance to help you make those types of decisions and adjustments in your life?
You have to create space to hear that inner voice. And so, it's great to listen to mentors, and it's good to have a mentor, especially somebody who's doing what you want to do or where you want to be, to learn from them in terms of what they did to get there.
Mm.
But your path is unique and it's uniquely yours, right? And so, with that, you need to take that information and use it as a reference, but create space to really get to know who you are and what
Mm.
you want.
Mm.
And many times during this journey, we lose sight of who we are. And because it's hard and you're just trying to survive, you're just trying not to drown, during this
Yeah.
process. And so, through things like journaling, I love journaling, just to allow you to reconnect with yourself, allow you to just have some just like quiet time to hear that inner voice so that you can go ahead and listen to them. So, things like journaling, things like the guided meditation that I mentioned before, all of those things help to just calm your mind. And because you have all the answers, right? But you just have to listen to yourself and
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I think that that's something that for my journey and many of my clients that I see, and in physicians, so used to going to other people to say, "What do I do next? How do I do this?" Because really, each step of the way toward the finish line up to that point is based on the opinions of other people about how well we are performing. So moving in that direction. Anything else that you would like to tell our listeners about what you have discovered and learned either in your own path or through your work from Hope for Med, as far as um, that journey now in today's environment in healthcare?
Um, for early physicians, one of the best advice I can give you, especially when it comes to your first job, is it's well worth the money to invest in getting somebody to review that contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't get like a, legal one-on-one course. There wasn't any time for that during our training. And those contracts are very convoluted. And so, reaching out to a lawyer to review your contract is so worth it. With actually every job that offer you get. So that's one thing that I definitely learned, because I don't believe I did that with my first job, but I have done that since with all of
Yeah.
my, next jobs that I've had. Um, and then really finding your community. So whether it's through, a community like Hope for Med or not, whether it exists already or create your community, but find a community, join a community, because, one day you are going to need somebody to reach out to, somebody to lean on, right? One of my favorite songs is Lean on Me. I love that song.
Yes. Which version? Which remake? Go ahead.
So as people, we are social beings and we need each other to thrive and to survive. And this healthcare arena, it's so challenging, and you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And on your bad days, you're going to need your community to lean on, to really support you, to remind you of, you know, all the amazing things that you've done before in the past, right? And to remind you that you're not defined by a bad day or a bad experience. So definitely find your community.
Yeah, that seems to be an emphasis that you have about community, and you talk about your Hope for Med community. How about you personally? Where have you been able to battle that sense of isolation and find your community?
Well, I created it.
Yeah, right.
Well, but before Hope for Med,
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of six children, and
Hmm.
so I really leaned on all of my siblings throughout my journeys and my ups and downs, on this path to becoming a physician. And I developed some very, very strong relationships with fellow friends that I had that I would lean on. I learned early on during my journey the importance of two things. The importance of saying, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know. We don't know
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And it's so freeing once you finally say, I don't know. Say I don't know to a patient, say I don't know to, your kids, like, but being able to say I don't know, being able to say no,
Wow, that's a tough one.
um, and being able to say I need help.
Wow.
So the sooner
Yeah.
you're able to say those three things, the better off you'll be for it.
Wow. I don't know. No, I need help. Boy, I think that that's probably great for every physician at whatever stage of your career, whether you're just getting started or whether you're at the sunset stage like me, is to put that up there and just kind of constantly go back to that. And if you're stuck for an answer to something, you can look up there and say, I don't know. or no, or I need help. And I think that those are things that, I think about that. And those are three things that as you go through medical school and residency, and you find yourself on the ward in front of that attending that's like staring down your face, those are the last three things that you want to say, right? And yet
Mhm.
those are things that we really need to say. And that, boy, when you do say those things, there's a whole world that can open up for you. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to kind of wrap us around. And first thing, I want to come full circle back to Haiti, because that's what really got you inspired to emergency medicine. Do you do any more international work at this point, or have you still had any interest in that?
So I still have an interest, but when I was graduating from residency, that was my whole, okay, am I going to go down the path of doing a fellowship in international medicine and going, down that path? I became a new mom.
Yeah.
And at that time, I made the decision that I wanted to be present for my children. I wanted to raise my babies and things like that. So I put that on the back burner until that my kids grow up and are completely independent. So my baby's 10. My daughter is now
Yeah, my
10. We're getting there.
yeah.
But that's not my priority, right? Is to really be a mom, grow Hope for Med, and then revisit that once my kids are, back in college or go to college. So yeah, so I made that intentional decision to not pursue that for the time being.
I hear you. I hear you. And I think that that little girl has an amazing role model to look up to and to follow as she pursues her life and her dreams in her life, in her career. So I want
Oh,
to
can I
ask, yeah, go ahead.
one thing
Yeah,
I'd like to add to
please.
that though. However, because I still love international and global health,
Hmm.
is Hope for Med is a global organization. So, we are open to people from wherever you are in this world. And I think, were you on that last panel discussion? You
Hmm.
were. You
I
were
was.
with
Yeah,
that
I've been
doctor
on
from
two now.
Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia, right? So, we've had featured panelists from all over the world. We've had attendees from all over the world. So I am creating this global organization. So although I'm not going out and actively engaging in all these humanitarian disasters because I've chosen to raise a family, I am creating a global organization that is helping people from all over the entire world. So,
And I have to be attest to that. I have appeared on in two of your forums, uh, and in both of them, there were people from all over the world tuning in, and I was impressed with the enthusiasm and the appreciation, the gratitude that people have for people addressing their well-being as they go through this challenging course to become a physician, which is an extremely rewarding career, also. Okay, my last question before you tell us about how to get a hold of Hope for Med and get a hold of you and all of that. If you were to kind of go back and um, and speak to your emerging self coming out of either medical school or residency, what's one piece of advice that perhaps you've mentioned or haven't mentioned yet that you would say to that young emerging physician at that time?
I think one thing that I would say is just believe in yourself.
Mm,
Trust that you are making the right decision because there's
mm,
really no wrong decisions
mm.
in, that you could make. There are learning opportunities. And so just trust.
Mm.
Just trust.
I love that. I love that. Trust in that decision. Even if it's a wrong decision, you learn from it and you grow. And uh, my first job out of residency, I knew was the wrong place for me. within a couple of months, maybe even before I started. But it was the only entree that I had into the city I wanted to work in. And it led me to the next job, which ended up launching my career. So that's a great piece of advice. Trust in yourself. Wonderful. So tell us about how to get in touch to connect with Hope for Med, with you, or anything else that information you'd like to pass along.
All right, well, perfect. So if you want to find out more information about Hope for Med, you can visit us on our website. It's www.hope4med.com. And you can reach out to me if you have any questions or want to learn more at drjb, so Dr. JB at hopeformed.com.
Excellent. Wonderful. And also I know you have many social media sites and connections to
all Hope for Med at Hope for Med. You'll be able to find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube. Just type in Hope 4 Med and we'll show up.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today on this episode. And I really look forward to doing more work with Hope for Med. I think it's an amazing organization that reaches folks that perhaps would not get the help that they truly need. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me. It was truly a pleasure.